What's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from November 13th to the 19th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos, and there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. Try to think of these videos like a time capsule. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the US cannabis industry, identify top US MSOs or Canadian LPs that you keep seeing pop up that you think will be worth way more in the future than they are now based on their current market cap, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so, as in the past I've seen the flip switch, and when it does, a lot of wealth gets created, so you might as well learn how to take advantage to help yourself, your family, and your community. That being said, this is not advice. Plan accordingly for your own situation, but let's jump in. As Bloomberg is even saying the quiet part out loud now, the Biden campaign needs to pivot to cannabis. Yeah, no shit. And this one came out November 14th, so we love to see it even out of Bloomberg, a mainstream headline like that. Another great question. This one was published in Forbes, but this one is unfortunately behind a paywall. But we love to pose it. Can David Boies legalize weed? The lawyer who helped make same-sex marriage a constitutional right is ready to end the U.S. government's war on cannabis. It's not about red or blue states. It's about serious green. And if he can obviously make the argument in order to get this passed, there's no reason he can't make the argument in order to get this common sense, unconstitutional status quo rearranged, at least to hopefully benefit the American people more than it has for the last, 7 decades, ridiculously. So that link will be in the comments as well, but unfortunately it is behind a paywall. So yeah, that is why I wanted to share a bit more information from it. But with that, on to some sales highlights, just to reiterate the fact that when you legalize cannabis, it brings a shit ton of money into your legal economy, and that's why every state that has done it is laughing their way to the bank and way ahead of every state that hasn't. And so this one from a local New Jersey article, NJ dispensaries are selling a ton of legal weed. Here's how much the state is cashing in. Now, the interesting thing is that New Jersey could be cashing in on a lot more if they'd open more and more stores. They started off with 20. I believe they're at 60. And so you can pause to read if you're interested, but the main takeaway is that I believe all the numbers are down here. And hey, it's great to see the growth continuing as they are opening more legal outlets. But if you open double or triple the legal outlets, you would be double or triple along the way in sales. Just common sense. But happy to share this, as New Jersey, one of the states that legalized a few years back on the East Coast, took a while to get going, and they didn't fuck things up as badly as New York. But, good to see things moving along in New Jersey. At least that link is in the comments. While adult use cannabis sales bring in hundreds of millions of revenue, this one is fresh out of Maryland, the most recent adult use market to flip, which I believe happened on July 1st. So we've got July, August, and September numbers, and then probably October numbers. All that to highlight what this article points out is that statewide sales reached $270 million in the first quarter, and so I believe that is referring to July, August, and September. Rec cannabis sales are expected to reach $821 million across Maryland by the end of the year. That's $821 million from July until December. That's nuts. Now makes up 60% of total revenue, of course, because adult use cannabis and medical cannabis are one and the same thing. Cannabis is the medicine. So it boggles my mind that publications and authors still, obviously, maybe just get it legalized or get it rescheduled first, and then we can start making that distinction. It's funny. We can extrapolate that sales are booming based on the fact that in the first 3 months they did 270 mil combined for adult use and med. And so with that, for marijuana moment, Michigan cannabis tax revenue grew by 49% over the past year. Hold on, this is supposed to be Connecticut. We're going to do Connecticut first. Connecticut adult use cannabis sales reached new high in October, while medical cannabis sales continue to decline, because why go through the extra hoops to get the same medicine you can get at a fucking adult use dispensary, right? All that to say, we love to see legal sales continuing to rise as Americans vote with their legal dollars for legal cannabis in Connecticut, and the figures are essentially broken down right here for you. So we can continue to see adult use sales trickling up from 14.3 million to 14.7 million, while medical declines a bit. But it does look like October overall sales fell a bit from September's overall. Mind you, adult use did surpass still, and so more down here if you wanted to pause read. Otherwise, full link in the comments. But just wanted to jump back as Michigan cannabis tax revenue grew by 49% over the past year, surpassing alcohol earnings. That's the second state we've reported on. Illinois is the first. Now in Michigan, cannabis tax revenue is also surpassing alcohol. Sales of legal cannabis in Michigan contributed $266 million in tax revenue to the government during the most recent fiscal year, which is amazing, but at the same time, that money has to be spent, responsibly and allocated into the right places. That is a whole nother discussion, but That's more than the state made from sales of beer, wine, and liquor combined. So clearly there are benefits to ending cannabis prohibition. In Michigan, one of the industry leaders, tax from sales of adult use cannabis were up 49.1% in this fiscal year, which ended in October, compared to 178.6 million the year before. It's an additional 87 million based on the volume. And one thing to point out is in Michigan was not a limited license state. I believe they handed out as many licenses as possible, which would be the definition of equal access to opportunity. And for that reason, we have seen the price of cannabis fall a lot in the state, but clearly the volume for that low-cost weed is driving a lot more sales and a lot more legal tax revenue, again, going into the legal market, hopefully, as opposed to going into the hands of organized crime groups, yada, yada. And so more here if you wanted to pause to read, but again, just happy to highlight the reality of ending cannabis prohibition. Full link in the comments. But now on to some studies that we ended up getting, which, again, reiterate, how have we not done this by now? For marijuana moment. Medical cannabis legalization led to reduction in frequent use of non-medical prescription opioids. Study finds. Well, this study came out of the International Journal of Mental Health and Addiction. While the decrease was rather small, apparently, and was concentrated in people who met diagnostic criteria for, the infamous cannabis use disorder, if that's even a thing. Maybe we can say that they have a THC deficiency, and if cannabis was legalized, it would make it easier for them to get the required cannabinoids in order to get their body back into balance and homeostasis. We don't know, though, because we won't fucking research it or deschedule. But researchers said it could signal substitution effects with partial replacement of opioids by cannabis. And I bet anyone in the right mind can agree, we would all benefit by more people substituting opioids for cannabis if given the option, right? And so the research team, more information here. I'm not going to spend too much time because we've got a lot of stories, but I invite you to pause to read if you're interested, as again, the data doesn't lie. We need more awareness for this, but just happy to share that. Full link in the comments. Another study, as cannabis users have more empathy and a greater understanding of other people's emotions. Study finds, probably a lot more than people on opioids too, because there's no way they can have empathy or really any sort of cognitive function when they're that doped up. Anyways, another study highlighting the benefits of this miracle plant that we have unfortunately wasted a lot of time keeping it in the Schedule 1 where it never belonged and missing out on a lot of data. But a study published this month in the Journal of Neuroscience Research found that regular cannabis users have a greater understanding of the emotions of others. Ironic. Finding that authors say highlight positive effects of cannabis on interpersonal relationships and potential therapeutic applications. The study from a team of neurobiologists at the National Autonomous University of Mexico compared measurements of empathy between a group of 85 regular cannabis users and 51 non-consumers, both using a 33-item test and MRI images of the participants. And so the study found that cannabis users showed higher scores in the emotional comprehension scales of the test. Yeah, no shit, what do you know? Or those focused on the ability to recognize and understand others' emotions. A very, very valuable skill. Some might even call it emotional intelligence. And they fucking harp on and on about it, right? Wouldn't this be beneficial for most? Differences observed between cannabis users and non-users in other empathy subscales weren't statistically significant, apparently. And so the differences in psychometric scores suggest that users have more empathetic comprehension. Yeah, bitch, read it and weep. And so full link in the comments, but I'll bring you down a little bit more if you wanted to pause to read. While we have another one, cannabis helps people quit using prescription sleep aids and allows them to wake up more focused and refreshed, study indicates. What do you know? And trust, I've listened to as many of the sleep experts as I could. Matt Walker, I believe, he's been on Joe Rogan a few times. He's been on many other podcasts highlighting how important sleep is, but that cannabis can negatively contribute to sleep. Sorry, but that just has not been my experience. And so I'm going to trust my experience and continue to go with it. And let me know what you think in the comments, whether cannabis is a very helpful sleep aid and if it's helped you get off of any prescription medications. Please let me know in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. But highlighting a new survey of cannabis consumers with sleep issues found that most prefer the use of cannabis instead of other sleep aids. Read it and weep, right? And so I invite you to pause to read. This study was conducted by a pair of psychology researchers at Washington State University, was published late last month in the Journal of Exploration of Medicine. And authors say they believe it's the first research comparing cannabis to prescription sleep aids and over-the-counter sleep aids. And what does that tell us? We need a fuck ton more studies on cannabis, sleep aids, opioids, the human body, and everything else. And I volunteer as tribute to be one of the first, because why not? And so I invite you to pause to read, otherwise full link in the comments. While we've got this one from Springer Link, a semi-naturalistic open-label trial examining the effects of prescribed medical cannabis on neurocognitive performance. And guess what? If anything, it seems to enhance it. So another study just wanted to share, as this one was from November 9th, pretty recent. And I invite you to pause to read the background and objectives, a study out of Australia, background and objectives and methods Well, results and conclusions. I invite you to pause to read the top part if you'd like, but just to highlight, these findings suggest that prescribed medical cannabis may have minimal acute impact on cognitive functioning among patients. And like we've seen with many other studies, cannabis users actually have improved cognitive functioning, much like we have more empathy, among patients with chronic health conditions, although larger and controlled trials are needed after we deschedule, finally, for fuck's sakes, and can learn everything that we've been waiting to learn. And so, love to point that out again. I don't know if we have any more studies. There might be one more. Not necessarily a study, but just something I've reiterated, something we know, that in legal markets, it's harder to get cannabis than where the black market runs rampant. So thank you, Mark Landers, for this image from MSN.com. Cannabis use by teens has fallen by 50% since legalization, and the source of this national survey on drug use and health, 2002 to 2021. Fucking do it already! Across all age groups, more adults are using cannabis, but use among adolescents is down. How could you not ask for this or not want more of this, right? And I mean, another hilarious kind of story to build off of that from MG Biz Daily. And hey, nice of you, Omar Saserbi, to try and like make this seem like it's a promising thing, as rescheduling could foster cannabis acceptance from healthcare industry. Yeah, no shit, we'd like that, but you also have to understand that the healthcare industry makes money, and they like their piece of the pie right now. And they don't want cannabis coming in to take any of their piece of the pie. Hence why it's taken so long to even get to where we're at. And I just find the irony of trying to point this out, where it's like, yes, in the healthcare industry, Big Pharma is paying a lot to keep this from happening. They've paid hundreds of millions, billions over the years. Billions, tens of billions, probably since the 70s, really. That is the reality. But the good news is that, of course, Schedule 3, from where we're currently at in the Schedule 1, is a massive incremental improvement. And while we want descheduling, we will have to take what we can get in the near term. And so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Just wanted to share it because it's kind of ironic, building off of all the scientific studies we're actually doing and data that we're generating, proving that, again, the status quo is based in political science and not science whatsoever. All that to say, if you're interested, pause to read, or full link in the comments to go through the rest of the story. Wanted to share this one from connoisseurs.io, as for anyone out there claiming that there's no manipulation whatsoever in the, at least on the CSE and the Canadian side, that's bullshit, because we can look at shortdata.ca and we can see that these stocks have been shorted for a very, very, very long time, for years, in fact, since the Dems flipped the Senate based on their lies that they were going to act on cannabis. All that to say is connoisseurs.io, thank you for sharing this. Hedge fund executive's sudden death exposes a firm deep in trouble. And so I'm not going to spend too much time on this story, because that's a whole nother, can of worms to open, but I will put that link in the comments. All this to point out is we know this from past stories, and we can see on shortdata.ca, there is some fuckery going on, as brokers began to dump the fund's positions, which included at least 3 cannabis companies, Curaleaf Holdings, Cresco Labs, and Cannabis Company Holdings. Very interesting, as this does highlight that there is some shenanigans going on. Now, I haven't checked shortdata.ca, but maybe I'll put that link in the comments for any of you that want to check this out and that, just to verify. But if you've been around for a long time, you're well aware of this. And I mean, we're hoping we're near the end of this, especially when something sadly tragic like this has to happen. On to the next one. Well, there was this big news that we got this past week. Actually, let me start with this one. Start with this one. Congressional lawmakers want updated cannabis banking guidance to stop punishing business owners for prior cannabis convictions. And so we love this. They want updated guidance, which from my understanding would just really allow uplisting, but also I guess allow for anyone in the industry to work with banks and open bank accounts, which is obviously the massive win and why we needed SAFER 3 years ago or 2.5 years ago. All that to point out, I love how they focus on to make it better for the business owners, as opposed to saving lives from passing safe, getting the cash off the streets. Now, I know they're talking about banking guidance, and so ultimately it's not about saving lives. It is more about actually giving the banking access that, again, they campaigned on 2.5 years ago and still have not given them. But all that to point out, this is, I believe, what these scoops were about. So I just wanted to share some insights from some accounts and cannabis contributors and creators that know more than I do. So from Sammy J, firstly, perhaps flying under the radar today is this article on Dem lawmakers urging the Treasury and FinCEN for updated guidance on legal cannabis businesses. As we know, an update would be triggered in the event of SAFER's passing, but is now being requested irrespective of reform. And so, of course, it seems like the reason they're doing this is because SAFER is stalled, because schmuck won't fucking hold it for vote in the Senate, and then the House has its own issues, but figured I would share this just as some information. Now, there's a bit more down here. Number 2, as previously discussed, an update to FinCEN's guidance pertaining to the SAR's financial institutions have to file when dealing these state legal cannabis businesses could be a game changer for safe harbor and custody. And so this is why it just kind of seems strange to me that it does focus a lot on safe harbor and custody, which seems more for institutional investors to invest and get access as opposed to, the small time players getting to open bank accounts. But I don't know, so I'm just thinking out loud. Let me know what you think in the comments. But on top of that, from MJ Stock Trader, this could be big. That updates FinCEN guidance, and it's the same idea of these lawmakers pushing for it. Since, again, Congress won't do their job. What does he say here? It is now being requested irrespective of reform. And so I guess if Congress is going to do their jobs, lawmakers write a letter to the president hoping for an executive action kind of thing. And so a few comments down here if you are interested to see what people were saying. But basically, just to share the sources of what they're referencing there, this is from Punchbowl News. Lawmakers press Treasury for red flag cannabis reform. So if you're interested, grab the link in the comments, but I'll leave this here to pause if you want to pause to read. Well, then, as this one I shared before, highlighting that their excuse for this is at least to stop punishing business owners for prior cannabis convictions, when that has nothing to do with it. Just let them open bank accounts, for fuck's sakes. Full link in the comments. And with that, congressional researchers flag legal liabilities for banks that work with cannabis businesses while reform bill lingers in the Senate. And is there a bigger waste of resources than a random congressional research group telling us what we already know, that because of the outdated federal overhang, banks are taking a risk by working with these cannabis companies? That includes possible criminal penalties under the CSA, the AML, and the Bank Secrecy Act. Like, are you going to come up with solutions, or are you just going to tell us what we already know? All of these people should just be laid off and said, hey guys, it's time to retire, have a good life, but we need to get some adults in charge here that can get some shit done. And so with that, the Cannabis Freedom Alliance, which I believe is a lobbying group started by Schmuck's former aide, Reginald Babin in New York, has hired its first lobbying firm, the Boies Public Affairs Group, finally, to work on issues related to cannabis reform, and the coalition, which includes the Koch-backed Americans for Prosperity and the R Street Institute. And so that's money that has long been needed in the cannabis space, at least to compete with the big pharma lobbying. And so we'll get more on this story next from the Hill, but just to highlight, Dan Aaron's pointing out that the key word here is Koch, and could be much bigger than we realize to help get the next incremental reform, which is from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, over the finish line. And hopefully this is true. FU Money saying when Advisor Shares announced you wouldn't be in Vegas this year, it was obvious you'd have your hands full buying the news later this month. Let's hope that's the case. And fortunately for these last 2 weeks, we have finished off strong, and so we'd rather see that than not. And so this is the article from the Hill. Bottom line, we do appreciate the Hill for actually reporting on this, because most propaganda outlets would avoid it, but it just highlights what we said in the last story, as Koch-backed money aims to end federal prohibitions on and criminalization of cannabis, which moving cannabis from the Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 would do, as it would no longer be federally legal, and states would be able to make their own decisions. And then you scroll down, that's really all there is on cannabis. And then get this, something about mental health. The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention hired Actum to lobby on issues related to healthcare, alcohol, drug abuse, veterans, and military personnel. If you've watched my channel for a while, is there anything better suited to help improve healthcare, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, veteran neglect, and, improving the quality of people going into the military? I've reported on all of it, and it's essentially been cannabis. And so either the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention is choosing to waste a bunch of money, trying to go the status quo route that has never worked, but I think the answer is fucking right in front of them if they ever have the common sense to figure it out. So more stories from law publications, JD Supra. Well, this is their newest November publication. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. It probably just highlights everything I've covered in my video since August until now, but essentially to bring you down to the bottom, you can pause to read, otherwise full link in the comments, but the juice of it is what we already know. The federal government's changing views on the benefits and harms of cannabis may invigorate investment and growth into the sector. It is just a matter of when is that flip going to finally switch? When is that dire moment going to happen? So from another publication, Denton's Cannabis Client Alert week of November 13th, 2023. So hey, thank you for making my job a little bit easier and summarizing some of these key points. So more here if you wanted to pause to read. It is quite a detailed write-up. I'll admit I found this morning. I didn't go through the whole thing, but for anyone that's interested, definitely check that out. Probably recapping what happened earlier on in the week up until now. And then with that from MJ Biz Daily, big investors keener on cannabis MSOs as rescheduling the Looms survey shows. This is as of November 9th, so it's older. Figured I would share it though. But all this to say, any of the last few stories, take them all with a grain of salt, because none of this is new news, right? We're all aware of this, and just wanted to find the number, roughly 61% of the group expected that U.S. multi-state operators in the cannabis space would beat the S&P 500 over the next year. And respondents also saw a 75% chance that the U.S. will go from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 within the next 18 months, according to the ADP's report. Now, obviously, you could have surveyed anyone 18 months ago and they'd say the same thing. I mean, they wouldn't say that there's a 75% chance, but like the timeline of 18 months, you could have surveyed people a year ago and they'd say, yeah, this could happen within the next 18 months. And it's still somewhat accurate just based on the fact that nothing moves fast either in government and there is no accountability, which is even worse. But all that to say, take all of that with a grain of salt, including this one with a grain of salt. It's still all speculation. While we know it's coming, we just don't know when. But from Todd Harrison, this is a quote from CEO of Glass House, Kyle Kazan. Again, I'm just sharing this because he's someone in the industry. He's the CEO of a company, so he would know better than I do. And he thinks, based on my discussions with policymakers in California and DC, I believe there's a high probability the DEA will provide its recommendation to move to Schedule 3 before the end of this year. And so again, first is the recommendation, then comment period, with implementation of the final rule likely by the middle of next year. And so we've heard this again, so you can take from this what you will, take from this what you will, take from this what you will. We ultimately don't know, so plan accordingly for your own situation. And so to summarize all that today, when's rescheduling? Charles Bachtell, CEO of Cresco Labs. Nothing has changed by the end of the year, around the end of the year. That's Kim from Trulieve, that's Boris from Curaleaf, that's Jason Wild from TerrAscend, now Charlie stating publicly on Schedule 3 by the end of the year. November 27th is the 90-day post-HHS deadline, apparently. That's pretty awesome. Now, how are they so confident? That's one question that I do want to ask. But as I say all that, just to highlight that Schedule 3 is coming, but absolutely no one has any idea when. And we hope that it's before the end of November. We hope it's before the end of December. But all that to say, folks, plan accordingly for your own situation. But we're going to party hard once this finally fucking happens. And so with that, an update out of Ohio, the 24th state to legalize. When will you be able to buy legalized cannabis in Ohio? Unfortunately, not for a while. I would imagine probably. So he's just giving us his opinion or his imagination. By the end of 2024, we should start seeing stores popping up for adult use. I just find this hilarious because, and then down here, Ohio should start seeing businesses by the end of last fiscal year, 2024. He's not answering accurately. He's answering based on what his imagination thinks, which I find is hilarious when we know from last week's video that medical operators will get first dibs within 9 months of the passage of the law. Now, hopefully that doesn't change because of some idiot lawmakers, trying to play hardball against cannabis. Ridiculous. But all that to say is, I just find it hilarious. You talk to a professor who answers by, I would imagine probably, meaning he's got no fucking clue. And we will have to wait probably until August of 2024, just for anyone who's interested. But hey, big congrats again to everyone in Ohio. You guys are finally getting the plant back, especially to one of my longtime viewers, James Singleton. Must feel nice. And so with that, on to MSO earnings. As the first one of this week was the Cannabist company reporting their third quarter 2023 results, or at least the ones that I'm going to share. And so I'm not going to spend too much time on this, although the numbers really just highlight that some of their existing markets are leaking a little bit more than the new markets. And so while new sales are great, they're not necessarily offsetting what their existing markets are having trouble with, which is unfortunate, but at the same time, I'm still very happy with the small position. I've started in this company at 53 cents Canadian, and I have no doubt, I was expecting this quarter to be the quarter that changes things. It's likely going to be the next one, or the one after that. And I know that's annoying to say, but it's just a matter of time when they cut costs in the markets that are, causing them trouble and, leaking. But then at the same time, seeing the massive growth from Maryland and new markets. As you can already see, top 5 markets by revenue. Maryland's already number 2 for them. Colorado, Maryland, New Jersey, Ohio, Virginia. Top 5 markets by adjusted EBITDA in Q3. Maryland, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia. And man, if Virginia does go with an adult use market faster than later, that would be, again, huge for them as well. Ohio, unfortunately, they don't move as quickly as Missouri or Maryland or some of these other states. So with that, you can pause to read operating highlights, enhancing scale and optimizing strategic retail network. Driving cultivation expertise and continued improvements. Sustained momentum on branding initiatives at retail and product level. Pause to read if you'd like. And then capital markets and liquidity highlights. Pause to read if you'd like. And then that's essentially it. So full link in the comments, but thank you, Cannavestments, for summarizing this. Someone who's financially literate, at least more than I am, that can break it down and help explain it like we're 5. Rebranding can't cover up a disappointing Q3 for the Cannabist company, with results below expectations and declining margins. The footprint is there: New Jersey, New York, Maryland, Ohio, Virginia, all new or soon to be rec markets, but operational improvements are needed to inflect towards profitability and cash flow. Well said. Of course, yeah. Rescheduling 280E would be a massive jump for all of these companies, no doubt. But so you can pause to read if you'd like to learn more about the Cannabist company. While the Cannabist company announces normal course issuer bidder, and so this came on the same day that they released their earnings. And so at least to appease investors, they announced at the same day of their earnings that the board of directors has authorized a normal course issuer bid to purchase up to 15 million of its common shares, representing approximately 3.6% of its issued and outstanding common shares as at November 9th. So apparently this is a buyback of 15 million of its common shares, 3.6%. Not sure when they're going to start or what the time frame is, but that's what I get out of this. And so that's at least more promising, as there's going to be less shares in the float after this is done with. And so you can pause to read if you're interested. With that, we'll move on to Cresco as they report their third quarter 2023 financial results. And so you can pause to read third quarter 2023 financial highlights, third quarter 2023 operating highlights. I do like to see how they improve their gross margin essentially. And besides that, it's just unfortunate the Columbia Care deal didn't go through, but I still believe that the rising tide will lift all ships once that comes through. And so I'm not too concerned with Cresco. I think they're still doing the right things by keeping their brand number one in top markets that at least they're already operating in. And that's essentially it for that. Full link in the comments, of course. But Cannavestments does the hard part for us is year of the core paying dividends for Cresco Labs in Q3 as the company overcame top-line decline by enhancing margins and reducing costs, leading to enhanced cash flow in the quarter. Maintaining its operating efficiency will be key while they await for adult use conversions in Ohio, PA, and Florida. So this will be the biggest thing for Cresco, and I'm just holding out for that. I don't mind holding the bags. I've held them this long. No reason for me to do anything now with them. And so, of course, you can pause to read for more details on Cresco's reports, but with that, Cannavestments did follow up once their 10K was released, adding that tax-adjusted operating cash flow was $17.7 million in Q1, $6 million in Q2, and $22 million in Q3 for $46 million year-to-date. But accordingly, some of that was made up with inventory sell-through and accounts payable rise, a large part of this generation. So we have to see what operating cash flow looks like when this stabilizes. So figured I would just share this, worth pointing out for those wanting to dig a little bit deeper. And so with that, on to Ayr, reporting their third quarter 2023 results. And Ayr is the other MSO I've been building a position in this year besides the Cannabist Co. And while I was expecting more revenue and gross profits similar to the Cannabist Co., I'm much happier with how Ayr has been able to cut costs and almost get to a positive net income based on their recent quarter. Now, for that reason, much like I said, the Cannabist Co., the new markets coming online is going to make 3 months from now and 6 months from now look a lot better. I think Ayr is going to be a massive beneficiary of that sort of same thought process, especially when we have all these catalysts lined up and it's just a matter of time progressing, right? And so you can pause to read some of the highlights if you're interested. But the main thing I wanted to bring you down to show you, of course, the link will be in the comments, but notice they got their operating loss down from 4.5 to 1.5, almost positive there. Revenue did drop a little bit. We'd want to see them keep more gross profit ideally, but still, I think they're doing a great job. Third quarter highlights, you can pause to read recent highlights, and I'm at least happy as a shareholder. I forget how many shares I have, but at $3.23 Canadian, especially based on this last week, they're almost already back up to 3. And that makes me happy that I started the new position in Cannabist Co. as opposed to, averaging down more in Ayr, because I'm happy with my Ayr and now I'm happy with my Cannabist. And so Outlook, full link in the comments if you want to go through that, as always. And with that, we've got Cannavestments. Weaker Q3 showing from Ayr as a result came in below consensus and margins declined, largely due to cultivation issues in Florida. Although SG&A reduction did enhance cash flow, Ayr completed a much-needed but also dilutive debt restructuring, which will push the debt into the future, meaning they will have 2 more years to continue operating while they await this massive flip, much like Cresco. Whew, cannot wait. And so more here if you wanted to pause to read from someone with more financial background, helping explain this like I'm 5. And for what it's worth, I did just want to share Goodness's Growth third quarter results. Now, I hold heavy bags in Goodness Growth, like $3 something Canadian. But all that to point out, hey, look at this. Q3 revenue, $24.7 million, increased 44% year over year and 28.2% sequentially, including discontinued operations, stronger revenue growth and margins largely driven by adult use activation in Maryland, and fortunately cutting costs in all other existing markets that seem to have, allowed for big offset, which we like to see. Obviously, Goodness Growth would have been promising if New York wasn't such a socialist shit show. But hey, look at that. Positive operating income of 5.9. I love to see that. And so hopefully Again, I think the rising tide will lift all ships, and I'll make my goodness growth money back. I'm not selling that either. Other MSO news from the Dales report: after a pause in October following an active September purchasing cycle of TerrAscend stock, Jason G. Wild is back at it. And so I don't think anything instills more investor confidence than seeing Jason keep buying like this. And so it's not much, but still, you'd love to see the confidence that he's at least instilling in shareholders, putting his money where his mouth is. While from the Cannavestments, it appears Jushi is also no longer paying federal 280 taxes similar to Trulieve, with those taxes now falling under long-term liabilities as an uncertain tax position while they await an IRS response. We shall see. And so, hey, bold strategy, Cotton. I do hope this pays off for you, but the main thing to highlight is this, I guess, comes from their 10K most likely, and this one as well. But last two possible resources. This is a new site called numbersnarrative.com, and I believe it was built by Adastra, who is an active member of the cannabis community on Twitter, which we love to see. But essentially, it's just him highlighting maybe what he thinks. I don't know. Take this with a grain of salt, much like investment firm snippets or anything else. But anyone interested in Green Thumb might be worth reading his bull-bear scenario analysis and investment thesis. And so seems pretty well written, and there's a lot of info here. So, of course, if you're interested in Green Thumb or already a shareholder, definitely worth grabbing that. While he also created this best cannabis stocks, data-driven analysis of stocks for potential gains in a cannabis bull market. And so, you know, the bull market might be finally returning once we start getting more spreadsheets like this again, right? And once we start highlighting that, how do the fundamentals not matter at this point? And while it's been a long time, fundamentals haven't mattered, neither have technicals. It's just another resource that you can take information in to help paint a clear picture and make better investment decisions for yourself. That link will be in the comments too. And so on to state news. Miami New Times reiterating what we heard last week from MJ Biz Daily. Florida Supreme Court appears not to buy Moody's challenge to wreck cannabis amendment, which we love to hear, expressing skepticism over their argument, as the argument is saying it was misleading. And, of course, the judge, fortunately, has some common sense. It says it does not immunize violations of federal law, holding up a copy of the 74-word initiative drafted by Safe and Smart Florida, a group funded by Florida's Trulieve, who spent $40 million on it. And he says, I don't know how a voter can be confused by that. I'm baffled by the argument. So that's very promising and increases the likelihood that the ballot will be on in 2024 in Florida. So we love to hear that. While from connoisseurs.io, an update out of Florida. OMMU weekly update from November 10th to the 16th. Florida market share leaders, THC market share leaders, and CBD market share leaders. While highlighting the qualified patient count and physicians, I do apologize, I did not do the math for this, but I will include the raw OMMU data in the comments as well, and the number of patients included week over week. And then highlights Green Dragon opened a new dispensary in Lake City. Green Thumb opened 2 new dispensaries in Crystal River and Tampa. So Green Thumb's really trying to hone in on Florida now, it seems. Muv, backed by Verano in North Miami, and The Flowery in Tallahassee. And so this was from last week, actually, which came late. So I'll also put that in the comments. But for those of you that are interested in the visuals, you can pause to read. Total THC sales in milligrams, pause to read. Total CBD sales in milligrams, pause to read, and total dispensary locations by company. With that, on to New York, because we got some big updates, and holy shit, if this doesn't expose the socialists and highlight why we need to get rid of them ASAP and put some American-loving, God-fearing, competent individuals in that'll work for the American people, I don't know what will, as the quiet part's being said out loud, because obviously the truth gets exposed. New York's loan program for equity-owned cannabis businesses is saddling some with steep costs. Yes, because it was never about equal access to opportunity, especially those harmed by the war on drugs. No, because equity has nothing to do with that. It's a socialist buzzword, and this was the experiment that has thus far failed in New York. And so this is an article first published in The City, just highlighting that the perception and the reality were very different, right? The perception, what the Dems wanted people to believe, was that they were getting handed free money by the state, that they're being subsidized. And you do this for votes. That's why they did that, right? But the reality was that's not the case, because the state basically couldn't raise any money. And any money they eventually raised from a fund in Chicago in a different state was highlighted in my last week's video, that they were going to use that money to pad the pockets of the fund in Chicago, to pad the pockets of the Office of Cannabis Management, and to extort the social equity applicants. You cannot make this shit up. And so I basically just explained the whole story to you all. Not going to spend much time on it. You can pause to read, otherwise you can grab the full link in the comments. But we just need to clean house and get these fucking idiots out of power sooner than later. And I don't know how we do that. Let me know in the comments. Anyone in New York want to chime in too? I would love to hear any input that you have. But with that, from Brad Racino, apparently as of the meeting that they had on Friday. This highlights that people want the legal market. People want to vote for legal cannabis with their dollars. And the biggest thing standing in the way in New York is socialist policymakers just driving the industry into the ground, or this, I should say the state into the ground. And so the good news, besides that, I probably should have shared this before this one, because I'm sure that kind of has something to do with it. I don't know, thinking out loud. But settlement reached in New York adult use cannabis licensing lawsuit. And so remember the veterans who sued New York saying, hey, if you're giving, first dibs to those harmed by the war on drugs, why wouldn't us veterans also be included or allowed in this first dibs, right? Of course they should. They're veterans, and they've needed cannabis for decades, and we haven't given it to them. All that to say is there was an injunction put in place by the Supreme Court preventing more than 400 conditional adult licenses across the state from opening for months. And apparently that has been lifted as of Friday. And so, of course, you can pause to read. Hopefully we'll get more news, and I will update once we get that. That should be big for registered operators, which is the name that the MSOs have to go by in the state. Ultimately, though, not much can change until these fucks are gone. And so praying for the best out of those in New York. And again, if you're in New York and you have any on-the-ground info, please share, as that would be helpful. And last one, I believe, out of New York, though, is at least the small victory. 4 days ago, New York lawmakers send cannabis tax cut bills to governor, providing local 280E relief for the 20 legal New York businesses. Not that the 8,000 or 5,000, however many illegal shops that don't have to pay tax, so they don't need 280E relief. They're fucking rolling in it. They don't care. It's just the irony. You cannot make this shit up. Hopefully nothing like this ever happens again, but that is New York. And hopefully, I guess, the 20 legal shops will get some sort of tax relief. It's the least they can get for jumping through all the hoops and still, not being able to run a profitable business and realizing, fuck, we should have just gone the illicit route, opened up shop, make so much money, pay the small slap on the wrist fine, find a new shop, rinse and repeat. It's just socialism fosters organized crime from the top down. And I hope New York has been the prime example of that. It doesn't work, and we need less and less, and we need to never see that again in any American states. But with that, from MJ Biz Daily, Texas receives 132 applications for medical cannabis dispensary licenses. And so happy to report that there's at least, of course, demand in a red state like Texas to want to supply medical cannabis if the opportunity is given. Thing is, it's just not clear how many will be approved or when. So the good news is that Texas seems to be opening up for low-dose medical cannabis. Unfortunately, no progress was made in the bills, but at least there's demand for filling this position, and hopefully that leads to something out of Texas. But with that, from the Duquesne Duke, it's high time for Pennsylvania to legalize cannabis. No shit, we're all well aware of this. And so you can pause to read if you're interested. And the good news is it seems like they're starting to make progress. So while the House has approved the Senate passed bill, it's not law yet. So I'll update you once this does go into effect. But this could help any medical provider sell directly to patients, which seems like a good thing for existing medical providers. The only thing is, we need adult use in Pennsylvania, right? That's the other main thing. And so, hey, huge for those that need a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative, but many more probably don't know that they might need to try and experiment with a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative in the form of adult use, and hopefully that comes sooner than later. But as it stands, PA's medical law currently says that only 25 businesses can be licensed for medical growing and processing, and only 5 of those licensees can sell directly to patients through vertically integrated dispensaries. Sounds like the MSOs. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But with that, an update out of Georgia as well. As Marijuana Moment shares, Georgia grants licenses to 4 more companies to produce low THC medical cannabis oil. And so on top of Botanical Life Sciences, I believe, and Trulieve, and we know Botanical Life Sciences is in a number of pharmacies. I don't know how many Trulieve is in, but apparently Fine Fettle GA, TheraTrue, Nature's GA, and Trevana Wellness are the next 4 to get access to Class 2 licenses, allowing them to grow cannabis in 50,000 square feet of indoor facilities only for producing low THC oil. You'd love to see it. This is going to help more people in Georgia get access to a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative that they need, or if they need it. And so more here if you wanted to pause to read, otherwise full link in the comments. But with that, I think we end off with a bit of a world tour as MJ Biz Daily reports. SEC raises red flags over part of Canopy's plan to enter the U.S. cannabis market. And so I will admit, folks, I found the story this morning. I did not read too much into it, but apparently the SEC does not like what Canopy wants to try and do. And so I invite you to pause to read if you're interested. We'll update you if there's any more news on this, but just wanted to share it because it seemed relevant. Pause to read if you'd like, and then a little bit more down here if you wanted to pause to read. Otherwise, full link in the comments. But if there's any big something in here that you find that I should have mentioned, please put it in the comments for anyone else to potentially notice. And then with that, this is out of Europe, businessofcannabis.com, as Caledon signs a new 26 million euro supply contract, or that's 26 million pound supply contract. Hemp and health turns to medical cannabis while cellular goods and chill brands partner up. I've never heard of any of these. They all seem to be smaller European players, but the main reason to share this highlight, yes, European cannabis stocks. So for any of you guys that are interested in maybe dabbling in here, go for it. But the main reason I did share this was this snippet here, is this morning, Caledon Pharmaceuticals announced that it has signed a new commercial supply agreement with an unnamed leading European medical cannabis company. And when I see these 5 words together, it makes me think either Curaleaf, Tilray, Aurora Cannabis, or Demacan, which I believe are the operators that are supplying Germany. Now, we don't know. It doesn't actually share the name, but just figured I would share that out loud. It could be one of these. Could be Curaleaf. Could be some foreshadowing. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments if you know anything more. But with that, on to this news from South Africa, as National Assembly approves bill to legalize personal cannabis use. We love that. This was done on Tuesday, though the measure does not legalize cannabis sales, which is a massive missed opportunity. I was fortunate enough to live in South Africa for about 4 months. I dated a South African, and while it was a great experience and she was awesome, it was better to be a tourist in the country than live there, I found, as a Canadian. And it is what it is. I decided to come home. But I just think like the fact that the unemployment rate was 25% when I was there, and that was one of the driving factors of me also returning home. A legal commercial market would be huge in creating tax revenue and jobs that would help go back to the citizens of South Africa if the money was spent properly. Now that's, I guess, the problem, because no tax dollars are ever spent properly in South Africa. Maybe they know that, and that's why they're not even doing it. But the unfortunate thing is individuals want to consume it legally. They have to grow it. And so obviously that takes a lot of work to grow it effectively. And I'm sure there's many people already growing it and people have friends. But it's unfortunate that you just don't see a commercial market spurring up where that could be huge, and just helping economies with real legal dollars where they need it the most. And so with that, we got this one from Carnival Associates LLC, another one of these big reports that we typically see coming out more and more as we head into a new bull cycle. And so I just invite you to grab the link in the comments if you wanted to look at the updated map or go through some of these numbers, legalization by state and population. I'm sure there's some interesting data in it. Obviously, probably make some projections and take any projections with a grain of salt, but any factual data that they update it with, definitely cool to be informed. While last one from the Dales report, I did not watch this, I will admit it. I retweeted it to myself to watch it at some point, and then of course putting this video together, I refound it again. But the DEA HHS update, the head of the HHS just said this. I don't know what they said. Another bullish signal, great stuff. And so I do plan to tune into this later today, but let me know in the comments what was said. And besides that, of course, do you think an announcement is going to come from now until the end of November or until the end of December? We hope. Let me know in the comments what you think, but as always, plan accordingly for your own situation, and expect the worst, but we're all hoping to be pleasantly surprised because this is long overdue. And holy hell, are we ever going to party once we finally get that? But that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you next Sunday for This Week in Cannabis News. Have a great weekend, everybody.